The goal of today's video is to make a one-size-fits-all piece of content that will teach you how to draw your gun no matter what type of setup you're using. There are several basic principles we're going to follow, and we'll be covering several specific setups such as the appendix carry, your competition rig, and even some of your duty holsters like the safarilands. Let's get right into it. The average person watching this video probably isn't a cop, and they probably aren't a competition shooter. So we're going to start with the most popular carry setup in America right now, the appendix holster. No, Mr. Toe Sucker! Okay, now when we're drawing from concealment, there is an extra step of clearing your shirt out of the way, but it's still a fairly simple process, and we're going to be following the same principles that we would with any other setup. A lot of instructors will break down a concealed draw, whether it's appendix or 3 o'clock, into 3 or 4 steps where it looks like clear the garment, get a purchase, come up here, and then come onto your target. I think this way of thinking about the draw is a little robotic and going to be slower than just intuitively getting the gun out and pushing it out. When you're talking with a beginner about this, it may not be as simple as simply telling them, get the gun out of the holster. So we do need to break it down a little bit for them. But once they understand, and most people do, that they have to get their shirt out of the way to get to their gun, everything becomes quite a bit easier from that point. The principles that transfer are: 1, we want to get a good purchase on the gun so that we are not coming out of the holster with a grip that needs to be fixed on the way to our target. So we have to make sure that our firing hand is connecting with the gun well. For an appendix holster, that means putting your thumb on the back of the slide rather than trying to dig it behind the gun. And then from there, as you come out, your thumb will simply wrap around. You're not wasting any time or hurting yourself by not having your thumb on the left side of the gun by that point. The other principle we want to follow, and again, this is with any other setup, is to make sure that our support hand is connecting with our firing hand and building our two-handed grip as soon as possible. So for the appendix draw, that means bringing the shirt up, but not too high, grabbing our gun, and then connecting with it right about in the middle of our abs. So, just like that. Again, if we were following that robotic 4-step process that a lot of people teach, it would end up looking like 1, 2, 3, 4, and we'd be moving in more of an L rather than a straight line. Now, other things that you'll see being taught, especially with red dot sight instructors, are this arcing motion where you're trying to swoop in and let your sights fall into place. While that may help for beginners who are losing their sights because they haven't trained enough to build a good index yet, this is also not something you necessarily want to do. The straight line is always going to be more efficient. Now that we've covered the appendix draw, let's talk about the competition rig. I know I said competition holster earlier, but this part will really apply to drawing from any outside the waistband holster that has no retention devices. There are 2 methods to drawing from a holster like this. You have the snatch, and then you have the scoop. Now the snatch is the easier of the 2, and it's quite a bit more consistent. We'll talk about why later. With the snatch, you're going to come down onto the holster, grab your gun, establish a good grip, and then you are going to follow that principle that we talked about earlier, where you are connecting your support hand to the gun as soon as you can. The scoop is the other method. Now, if trained right, the scoop has the potential to be quite a bit faster for you. The reason why is because instead of coming up and then down onto the gun, you're going to simply scoop the gun out of the holster, like so. Now you may be asking, why doesn't everybody scoop if it's that much more efficient? Well, the reason why is because it may be less consistent, especially if you're not training the scoop draw a lot. This is because when you're scooping the gun out of the holster, if you fail to do it right, you can have a bad grip where there's space in between your firing hand and then the beaver tail of the gun that you then have to fix as you're on your way to the target. What you may gain in speed may not be worth it if you're trying to take a low percentage shot. Now again, if trained right, the scoop is extremely fast. If we take a direct comparison here between snatching and then scooping, you can see you're gaining about 1 to 2 tenths of a second off of your time when you do it right. Now again, the key word there is potential, because if you were to draw with the snatch method 5 times and then draw with the scoop method 5 times, chances are that at least 1 or 2 of those scoops will not provide you with the grip that you want. One key thing to note is that you do not want your elbow to be out of line with the direction that your arm is going to move in. One problem that a lot of shooters, including myself, have had is where their elbow may be a bit flared out, and as they draw the gun, their sights are going to be off to the side of where they expect them to be. So make sure as you're drawing, especially with a holster like this, that your elbow is in line with your arm and your sights should appear in the right place every time if you train. If you're a practical shooter and you do compete, one thing I see a lot of shooters do is they grab the bottom of their holster, or they have their hand wrapped around the bottom of their holster. I don't like this start position, and it's a bad habit that I've been trying to break too, because starting here just puts you at a disadvantage compared to somebody who starts right here with their wrists just below their belt, like most start positions are prescribed. So again, starting here, especially with the scoop draw, is going to cause that gun to rotate quite a bit more than if you were to start right here and simply bring your hand up. Now that we've talked about concealed holsters and competition style holsters, let's talk about holsters with active retention. When I say active retention, I mean any device that actively keeps the weapon in the holster besides the simple friction of the kydex or whatever material the holster is made out of. So in the case of these Safariland holsters, which are extremely popular among law enforcement and military units, you have what's called the nub. By dragging the nub back in a natural way that you would with your thumb, you are going to deactivate the plastic lever that holds the ejection port of the gun in place. The way we draw with these holsters is pretty much the same way that we would draw from the competition holsters we just covered, except for the fact that we have to deactivate that piece of active retention. It's just a matter of practice and getting the timing right. To do your snatch draw, you're going to, again, come down like you normally would, and your thumb is going to naturally hit that switch on the same side that it would anyways with the competition holster. So coming out, and you're going to again connect with your support hand as early as you can, so right about here. Where it gets interesting is when you try to scoop draw with these holsters. It gets quite a bit harder with a level 3 holster, which we'll show right now, that has 2 devices that you have to deactivate compared to this level 2 holster. You may ask, what's a level 1 holster? Well, the level 1 is any holster that only uses friction instead of an actual device. When we're scooping with these holsters, you do want to come up, but the problem is if you come up too violently, it's going to be quite a bit harder for you to hit that switch, and your timing just may drag and be off because of that. What you want to do is train this quite a bit more and time it right. I still don't totally have it down, but when you scoop, it should look a little bit like that. So again, we have the snatch and then the scoop. It's a very subtle difference, but you're doing quite a bit less backtracking than coming down and bouncing off of the holster. So snatch, scoop. Try both of these methods, see what works for you. There are shooters at the highest levels that use both of these methods and swear by them. Some only prefer the snatch because they like the consistency that it offers, and then some like the scoop because it is inherently faster if you train it enough to be consistent with it. We've talked about how to draw your pistol from each of these setups. Now let's talk about how to train this so that sub-second becomes subconscious and you're able to start really chasing draws that drop jaws. Say that 5 times fast. Okay, there's several good ways to train your draw, but all of them serve the same purpose. You're looking to create the most efficient and consistent method of getting your gun out of the holster so that you can quickly and efficiently perform all of the work that happens after that point. Some of these methods use a shot timer where you can set a par time, and then other methods just involve drawing your gun over and over again and looking at key points in that process. For example, when I'm dry firing, some reps I will just be focusing on how quickly it takes me to get my firing hand onto the gun. Other reps, I may be looking at my shoulder tension or ensuring that I'm bringing the gun up to my eyes rather than moving my head around and fishing for my sights as the gun is coming up. One other thing that you need to make sure you're working on is building your grip as early as possible. The sooner you develop this skill and make sure that your support hand is connecting with your firing hand quickly, the better off you'll be in the long run. And to directly answer the question, how long does it take to get a sub-second draw? The best answer I can come up with is as long as you want it to, because there are some people that get a sub-second draw within weeks and others where it takes around a year. One thing that I think is important to note is that you will absolutely have a sub-second draw in dry fire before you'll have a sub-second draw on the range where you're getting a good shot out onto a target.
9-4, that's a PR.
This is completely okay, and it's simply part of the progression. You're going to have to push past it. One last thing that I think is important to mention for the sake of safety is that you should not be training for a sub-second draw in live fire at the range when you're a beginner. This skill, like many other skills, are mainly built in dry fire, and it's a lot cheaper that way anyways. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching, and I hope you learned a thing or two from this video. One thing I will say about the draw is, once you get to a competent enough point, when I say competent, I mean sub-second A-zone shots at least 7 yards, then it will probably benefit you more to start focusing on other fundamental skills that are a part of being a good shooter. There are a ton of mediocre shooters out there that actually have a sub-second draw, but they lack in their grip, their target transitions, their movement, and other skills like that. Look forward to some of those videos coming from us in the future. We want to help make you a well-rounded, competent shooter, whether it's for self-defense, law enforcement, or simply being a good competitive shooter. We are here to help you do that. Thank you for watching, and I hope this video made you a better marksman.